before we'd even met, they'd listened to me, they heard my opinion on some things. They'd made a decision whether they liked me or not, that microsecond when they were listening to the show. And like, oh, this guy's good or this guy's bad, or I'm willing to talk to this guy, I'm not willing to talk to this guy. All of these micro decisions are made, aren't they, when people listen to a podcast? If you take that networking, that influence and that credibility, they all help your business just because people buy from people they know, like, and trust, right?
Welcome back to Pod Junction Podcast, the show where business leaders share how they use podcasting to grow, connect, and build their brands. Today, I bring you the gift of Matt Edmondson, the man who needs no introduction around here because he and I co-hosted the original version of this podcast. Matt is still behind the mic, hosting eCommerce Podcast, recently named one of FeedSpot's top 100 e-commerce podcasts. So congratulations, Matt, and welcome back.
Thank you very much. It's can I just say, we were ranked number 9 out of the 100.
Well, top 10, right?
Yes, that makes us top 10, which, it's very exciting. I don't know what it means, but it's very exciting.
Yeah, it's good. The numbers look good.
What's really funny is on that list, I obviously know quite a lot of the e-commerce podcasters, right? And so I know a lot of the guys on that list. And so Brett Curry, for example, is on the list. And when the email came out, I happened to have a call that day with Brett Curry. Have you had Brett Curry on the show yet?
No, he's lined up for being on the show, not on yet. Yeah.
So when Brett came on the show, I was like, dude, you should go and check this page out. He was like, I'm not happy because he's like, you're 9 and I'm in whatever position. He was like 20th or something. And so, so there's a few of my friends I've called since being on that list.
Healthy competition. I love it.
Well, yes, something like that. I don't know if it's healthy or whether it's just competition, but it's fun. It is fun. And actually, I mean that, well, let's start. Let's jump in. One of the cool things I think about podcasting is obviously the networking side of things from a business point of view. We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that I can look down that list, that top 100 list, and actually say there are a chunk of those guys and gals who are friends. Do you know what I mean? And I've got to know them over the years, not in a we're competition kind of way, because obviously, I'm number 9 and they're not. So it's not competition. But no, just in a general kind of actually not being afraid to talk to those people who are in the same space, who are doing the same sort of thing with the podcasting thing. I think that's super, super helpful. And I really like it. I do like it. A couple of them have been WhatsApping me since it's come out. And so it's cool, and I would say there are side benefits to podcasting, which is where you do get to know who your, quote unquote competitors are. And you get to sort of become friends with them. And actually you get to scratch their back. They get to scratch yours. We send clients their way. They send clients our way. So, excuse me. Yeah, it works super well.
Yeah, I totally agree. I had Matt Halloran on recently.
That was a great show, by the way.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed that show. I did listen to it and I thought he was really good. Yeah, I'm not going to do the singing thing though. I thought,
no,
I'm going to spare the world that nightmare. Matt singing. Geez, can you imagine? Well, you don't want to imagine, do you really?
No. Let's move on.
But let's move on.
So, Matt, you're more than a podcast host. You have a business, and eCommerce Podcast supports that. Or actually, no, you have eCommerce Podcast that fits into that picture somehow. So explain your business, explain how the podcast fits into that.
It's not an easy sentence to say, is it?
Yeah, sorry.
So we have an e-commerce services business, for want of a better expression. So we help other e-commerce businesses with their e-com business, whether that's through services like we do their marketing or their fulfillment. They're probably the most popular ones. Whether it's through coaching, we do coaching, or even one of the things that we've started doing in the last 12 months is acquiring e-commerce businesses and partnering with them. And we take equity in their e-com business and work with them to help it grow, and everybody wins at the end of the day. And that's kind of what we do. It's all relative to e-commerce. Sort of e-commerce is the gravity, I suppose, which holds everything together. So that's what we do. An e-commerce podcast actually started before we solidified that was what we did, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I can't sit here like some of your guests and say, oh, we have this e-com services business. I know what we'll do. We'll set up a podcast to help grow our business. It's not our story at all. We just started the e-commerce podcast because we thought it'd be a laugh. Just like,
and it was.
And it was. It's been great fun. But also, I think we had a very different way of understanding about podcasts when we started it 5 or 6 years ago, because we thought, if we needed to build an audience, mm-hmm. and we thought actually if we could get 10,000 downloads or whatever target we had, then that would be great. We're reaching potential customers, but that's not how it's worked for us at all. But that's kind of how it started. So I guess we are changing e-commerce podcast would be a better way to put it now. So how it started is not what it's turning into. But yeah, that's kind of a long-winded answer to your question, isn't it? So we do e-commerce services. We do e-commerce acquisition. We invest in other e-com businesses, and we have some fun doing that. An EP, as we call it internally, e-commerce podcast, because this gets really boring saying e-commerce podcast all the time. So we just call it EP. That kind of is our main lead generation tool. Mm-hmm. Certainly very top of funnel lead generation tool. So, yeah.
Cool. So you said you started the e-commerce podcast to build an audience. How has that expanded your influence?
Well, we built an audience, and we obviously have a lot of people listening to the show, or watching it on YouTube or whatever. It's always intrigued me how, like, if I go to an event, mm-hmm. So in a couple of weeks, I'm not going anymore, but for reasons I won't bore people with. But there's an event, for example, coming up in Dallas the end of this month, called Sub Summit, and I can go to that event. Which is all about subscription commerce, which is part of e-commerce, mm-hmm. The whole subscription thing. And I can go to that event and people go, oh, you're that guy. Okay. And so people would have listened to you. They would have maybe watched you. It's bizarre when you get recognized. That freaks me out a little bit. Even to this day. It doesn't happen often, but probably, I don't know, half a dozen times a year, people will go, oh, you're Matt Edmondson, aren't you? And I get very scared when they say that. It's like, you're not a police officer,
stalking
are you? So yeah, how has it expanded the influence? So we've definitely grown the audience, but as a result, I think we have increased our influence because we are rightly or wrongly seen now as experts in the field, right? Mm-hmm. So, which always intrigues me actually, because when you run an interview podcast, which is what we do on EP, we interview people. It's not a coaching podcast. It's not anything sort of about me, at least not anymore. It's all about the guest. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not the expert, they are, but I get them perceived as an expert because I'm talking to people, right? Yeah. So, and there are certain elements of e-commerce which I'm definitely not an expert in. But I get asked questions about it all the time because I had somebody on the show talking about it. I'm like, well, you heard as much as I did, So influence-wise, I think it's really interesting. I think it does create influence, and I think the podcast, it's a bit like writing a book, the ability to say, Matt Edmondson author, or Matt Edmondson podcaster. It just gives you that influence that maybe you wouldn't have had if I just wrote Matt Edmondson.
Yeah. There's that credibility that gets built into it.
Yeah, and there's a close link, isn't there, between credibility and influence? Mm-hmm. And you can, especially in the long term, you can have you take someone like Andrew Tate, for example, had a lot of influence but zero credibility. So his influence won't last long. You take someone like Jesus, credibility is high, influence is high, and so 2,000 years he's still having an impact. And and it's interesting. I think you need both.
Yeah.
I think influence without credibility is a very short run thing.
I like that.
That's deep, isn't it?
That is deep for a bank holiday Monday.
Yeah, let's write that down quick.
No, that's good. So you talked about networking initially when we first started recording, and now you're talking about credibility. You're talking about influence. How do those feed into, as a result of your podcasting, how does that feed into your business?
Well, it's not rocket science, is it? Sort of to then make the leap, which says, well, if podcasting helps you with networking, the more people you meet, the more likely you are to, especially if you're meeting the right kind of people, whether through a podcast, whether in person or whatever, the more you meet them, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to help somebody, right? Building a business without networking is an odd thing to try and do. I think you have to meet people. People have to like you and engage with you, and I think that obviously has an impact. And I think it's really interesting with podcasts, the amount of people that I talk to who feel like they already know me, right? So we have just done an acquisition with a company. As you are very well aware, we've just done an acquisition. What was interesting at the start of that deal, right? So when we started the conversation, before it turned into a fully fledged deal, before I'd even spoken to him, he had listened to the podcast, right? And he'd gone away, him and his wife had listened to a few of the episodes of the show. And it's interesting how there is therefore that sense of, I'm starting to understand you, I'm starting to know you, which again sort of bridges the gap then to influence, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So before we'd even met, they'd listened to me, they heard my opinion on some things. They'd actually, I don't know whether they would verbalize it this way, they'd made a decision whether they liked me or not in that microsecond when they were listening to the show. And like, oh, this guy's good or this guy's bad, or I'm willing to talk to this guy, I'm not willing to talk to this guy. All of these micro decisions are made, aren't they, when people listen to a podcast? How does it's simple things like, what does he sound like? How does he laugh? Is he a boring guy? How does he respond maybe to when he's talking to someone who's really boring, which obviously never happens on my podcast. But it's one of those where if you take that networking, that influence and that credibility, they all help your business just because people buy from people they know, like, and trust, right? And so to know you is great because they get to know you through podcasting. That's all part of your networking. They like you, hopefully, if you come across in a credible way, they will like you. And credibility also adds to trust, doesn't it? And so then that you're then influencing how they perceive you. And marketing is all about what does Rich Rising say? Marketing is all about managing perception. And so with those things, you're managing that perception. And like I say, on this particular deal, before I'd even spoken to them, all of those things had been happening because of the podcast.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, because if you were putting together some kind of document to try and do business with someone, those are the things you would leave off those pages, and it would all be about what you can achieve. But all the things that are coming through in a podcast are the things that really keep a client. Yeah,
they are. It's an interesting, because simple things like you take Podjunction, right? Is someone going to be prepared to work with Podjunction? Well, they're going to listen to you talk, and you don't come across as the expert necessarily because you're interviewing experts, right? But how you phrase questions, how you ask them, how you listen to people, how you respond to what they say, how you then ask follow-up questions. These are all these sort of micro indicators, which are, I think, super subconscious, right? And so the listeners listening to it, deciding whether or not to work with you, these are all these unconscious signals which you're giving off as to whether or not you're credible, whether or not you can help them. and it's not a pitch. It's not like you sat there and gone, well, I'm going to help you do your podcast. No. It's more, you just ask interesting questions, and then people think you're interesting. It's a really fascinating. I'm sure there's a massive chunk of psychology around this, and so it's certainly consumer psychology, but it fascinates me how that works. But these aren't things that you're taught in sales school on how to close a sale. These aren't things that you're taught in. I wasn't taught in my degree. Do you know what I mean? But it makes sense because it's human behavior, and humans respond to other humans, don't they? And so, especially again, I don't want to get too philosophical or deep, but I think we live in a world now which has become very isolationist. So it's very, I work at home, I'm in my shed, you're working at home. Whereas, I appreciate it's bank holiday, but if you think about pre-COVID, we were in the office the whole time, right? So we're starting to work by ourselves more. I have, my van, which people who know me will know. I go on about my van. I take my van down the river and I work down the river. I'm working there by myself. I'm isolated. And, I'm walking down the street. I've got headphones in. So then I'm not even listening. Not only am I not listening to people, I'm not listening to nature and all that sort of stuff around me. So we live in a world where everything gets sort of cut off. And as a result, I think it's harder and harder to break into that, right? And to, if I think about business, for example, if I think about business 30 years ago when I started, right, there were a lot more meals involved. Let's go out for a meal, right? We'll just sit and chat over a meal. We don't do that now. Do you know what I mean? It just would feel a bit weird, maybe. It's certainly not the default action. Whereas I think something like podcasting, most of the time when people are listening, they're walking the dog, they're driving the car, they're usually by themselves. So they're sort of in this isolated phase. And I think the way you respond, it draws them in and it gives them this sort of sense of feeling connected and community. And that's definitely not something you get taught at Harvard. I say definitely, I don't know. I've not been for a little while. Maybe they do teach it now. But I think it's these things, these sort of soft things, which actually make a big impact on your business, but they're sort of hard to define, really.
Yeah, totally agree. I like how you called it micro indicators. Good word. But yeah, because I think it captures the verbals, the non-verbals, and it really helps people to figure out if they like you or not. Like you said, know, like, and trust.
Well, it's everything, isn't it? It's the way you, even simple things like, what clothes are you wearing? What, as odd as that sounds, how's your hair? All of these things, do people connect with that, yes or no? And I think it's a really interesting thought experiment in many ways.
Yeah, cool. Matt, I just want to go back to the networking side of things. You've talked about your business performing so much better as a result of having a podcast, and you've talked about your friends who are in the e-commerce industry and have podcasts and how they do so well. Have you ever faced any kind of skepticism from others in the e-commerce industry about whether podcasting is a serious tool or not?
Oh yeah, you face it all the time, don't you? You normally face it from people that, one, don't understand it, or two, have tried it and it's not worked for them, whatever that means, right? So a lot of people that you come across that are sort of skeptical about podcasting will start the sentence off with, well, I tried that and it didn't work. And so, which I think is quite a loaded statement, because you're like, well, what does that mean? What did you try? What did you do? And why did it not work? What did success look like for you when you got started? And why did you not achieve that? And most of the time it's because, I would say, of low numbers. It's a really odd one in the sense that you do a podcast. And I think you've had quite a lot of guests who talk about podcasting's not it's not, I do a podcast today, I see the results tomorrow. It's I do a podcast today, I see the results in 18 months, right? Yeah. You've got to think outside of this short-termism box. It can work in the short term, especially if you put money behind it, right? Which is a big thing. One of the things I was talking to Brett Curry about the other day. He was saying that there's some new ad forms coming out from Google, which are going to enable, he thinks, podcasters, especially with YouTube channels, to use ads to target people to get subscribers more. So Google have recognized a need for the sort of the ad space here. And if anyone knows how to do that or is going to figure it out, it's going to be Brett Curry. That's what they do. I mean, this guy's a genius where YouTube is concerned. And so I'm really intrigued. I'm catching up with him again in about a month's time to see where things are up to. Because once he's cracked it, he said to me, once I've cracked it and got to position 8, I'll tell you what I did, Matt. I'm like, yeah, whatever. So if you can, it's like any form of advertising, I suppose. You can put money behind it and see results pretty much straight away in terms of the numbers, the downloads. What that doesn't relate to, even if you get 10,000 downloads tomorrow, because you've only done one show, it doesn't relate to that emotional currency, that sort of know, like, and trust factor, right? Because that takes time to build. Any relationship takes time to build. And so it's true with people listening to you. It's going to take a little bit of time to figure out whether they like you or not, or whether they trust you. They'll know instantly if they don't. But there's going to take a bit of time for them to understand whether or not they want to work with you, I think. So even if you put money behind it, it's going to take a little bit of time. So yeah, I think if I go back to this idea then that actually people have been unsuccessful with a podcast because they've looked at download numbers and thought, I've had 100 people listen to the show, therefore it's not functioning. And so I get it, because I think if you would ask me at the start when we started EP, it would have been the same thing, right? If they'd have said to me, oh, Matt, in 5 years' time, you'll have 100 people a month downloading the show, I'd have been, well, that's a waste of time, isn't it? But now I'm like, well, if there's 100 people downloading the show, they're my ideal client.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And actually, a few of them downloading the show are my clients, right? And this is, again, something you guests have talked about on the show. I know that where actually those who are your clients already listen to the podcast and it maintains that client relationship, right? But I think what's becoming more and more obvious now with both YouTube and podcasting is actually the channels with the small numbers can do increasingly well if you target a specific niche. And if you don't worry too much about the numbers. I'd rather have 100 highly targeted ICPs listening to the podcast than I would have 10,000 just
passing time.
Yeah, just people that aren't really who are helpful for my business. And I mean, obviously I don't mind them listening to it, but one of them is going to produce a lot more fruit than the other, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think people do get disillusioned and disheartened. And so as a result, they become quite skeptical about the podcast. They don't think it's going to work. And of course, then there's people that just don't understand podcasting. Think it's too technical, think it's something they can't do. It's a medium that they don't understand. Again, because I think it's not, in the world in which we live, especially in e-com now, it's really hard to look at something like podcasting and justify it because it's really hard to track the ROI. Yeah. Right? Whereas if I spend 10 grand on Google ads, I can track that ROI. We do it every month. We spend tens of thousands of pounds with Google, with Meta, and I can track it and I can go, right, you know, that performed well, that didn't perform well. Let's do more of that. Let's not do more of that. It's instant. We can see it. Yeah. But man alive, is it expensive? Whereas with something like podcasting, I can't tell you this month, you know, I've recorded however many podcasts I've recorded. I can't tell you yet the return on investment because I don't know. And how would I track it? You know, this is one of the things that Neil Hoynes talks about from Google. He was one of the guests on the podcast. A real coup to get him actually as a guest, a real coup. He's quite high up in Google, and he came and talked about how there was a woman who came, they were looking at a woman who was buying a pair of shoes and trying to track down what caused her to buy those shoes, right? So she went onto the website, she bought a pair of shoes, but she had, I think it was like 236 of these touch points with the brand, right? 236. So she went to the website, she read blogs, she looked at their organic social posts, she looked at paid media, she watched maybe a video. You don't know if a friend talked to her, but at what point did she decide to buy? You have no idea. You genuinely have got no idea. So it's becoming harder and harder to track things, even like Google Ads. So with podcasting, you've got no chance. Someone contacted me the other day and said, Matt, I love your show. We're thinking of selling our business. Is this something that would be interesting to you? Mm-hmm. At what point did they choose to buy, for want of a better expression? At which point in the show? Was it a sentence that I said? Do you know what I mean? It's really hard to start to measure it. All I can go is, someone listened to the show. I don't even know what episodes they listened to. I find that this is why people struggle with podcasting a little bit. I appreciate this is a long answer to your question.
Keep going.
Because of things like that, because it's hard to measure, or they've struggled to understand the what actually does happen. There's quite a lot of soft skills, I think, involved in podcasting. And the fly, that's why I'm doing that. Sorry if you're watching, I'm just or because they've tried and it's not succeeded, whatever success has meant for them.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. Like I guess our experience is if you stay in or keep trying with your podcast rather than giving up after a short time if you feel like it's not working. I think our experience has been that we've learned so much as a result of carrying on.
Yeah.
And as you said, one of the things was, straight out the gate, you want thousands of downloads and you think that's when you've made it and that's when it's really working. But actually, I think from our experience and learning, it's been about the niche.
Yeah, it has. And you're right, it's about longevity. So what number are we on now with Pod Junction? What
80
episode
something
number? So you're in the 80s already, right? And it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because has it been easy? No, not at all. Has there been a massive amount of fruit from it? You could argue either way. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those where I think we're so it's so complicated to understand in many ways. So I know with Pod Junction, the service is very much a case of first 5 episodes. Within 5 episodes, I think you're going to know if you've got a feel for whether you personally want to do this. Within 20 episodes, I think you're going to find out what your voice is. Do you know what I mean? What this show looks like. 95% of people have dropped out by the time you get to episode 20. I don't know what the stats are, but it's like 95 or 98%. It's some horrendous amount, right? People. But I think in your head now with podcasting, if you want to win, you've got to go, I've got to do this for 18 months, do 1 podcast a week for 18 months. Well, that means I've got to do about 75, 80 episodes. Yeah. And then I can start to make some decisions. I mean, if you think about just with Pod Junction, the pivots that you made along the way and where you are now, it's definitely not where you started.
No.
And so if you're not giving yourself that space and that permission to travel the long distance and tweak as you go along, podcasting is probably not the thing for you. If you just want to make 3 or 4 videos or 3 or 4 podcasts, then fine, that's not really a podcast. That's just more of a presentation, or do you know what I mean? That's just a few videos. But I think podcasting itself, just the word to me implies longevity and consistency, and it's something you have to keep doing. I think that's a really important point.
Thanks, Matt. What are some of the biggest challenges you're facing at the moment when it comes to e-commerce podcasts?
Other than my team. Yes. That's really unfair. I'm terribly sorry. Some of the biggest challenges, I think, for EP is just at a really interesting place. I think because we have gone through various sort of journeys in our e-commerce journey. So we have set up and run our own e-commerce businesses, still have our own e-com businesses. We run other people's e-commerce businesses through our e-commerce services. And now for the last, however long, 8, 12 months, we've been thinking about acquisitions and partnering with e-commerce businesses. Because the nature of our business has changed, the podcast, I think, is now changing as a result to help us better reach our ICP, or ideal client profile.
Yeah.
Sorry to use 3-letter initials, acronyms. Winds me up when people do that on e-commerce podcast. I'm like, what do you mean by that? Just because everybody uses 3-letter acronyms.
Yeah.
And I'm always aware that if someone listening to the show is new to e-commerce, they're going to go, I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. So I think because the nature of business has changed for us over the last 12 months, it's meant that we've had to change the e-commerce podcast. And I have no idea how many episodes we've done. So I don't know if you actually know how many episodes we've done. It's hundreds. Yeah, lots, right? We've done it for 5 years. So, we've done it a fair amount. Maybe 6 years this year, actually.
Yeah.
Jeez. So even 6 years in, we're still pivoting. So and I think that's probably the biggest challenge is to not, for me, is not to go, well, we're 6 years in. It's easy to do. I can just rock up. I can just blag my way through it and not really care. Because I think that actually comes through and I think people stop listening.
Yeah.
It's that constant reinvention of understanding where your business is at. What's the best way the podcast can serve that? But understanding that actually that shift, you're not going to feel the impact of that probably for a good 12 to 18 months. So you've got to think a little bit more medium term with the whole thing. And so, I would say that pivot, which is a word I really can't stand.
But you used another one right after that, reinvention. That's good.
Yes, let's use that one. The reinvention, the recalibration.
The recalibration. No, I think what you're saying, actually, it's a really healthy way to podcast because, as you said, you're staying relevant with the audience and with the business. Because if you just carry on the way you always did right from the start, it's not going to resonate in the same way. No,
it doesn't. Because, like you say, the business changes, but also I think the way people listen and consume content changes, right? Yeah. So we do a weekly live stream, not to do with EP, but to do with something else. And I think yesterday I spent probably 3 or 4 hours just going through what the latest research is in terms of how people engage with that type of content and going, okay, so we're about 70% of there. So if we change this and this, then it will make the content more engaging. Do you know what I mean? And they're not massive changes, but it's easy, I think, if you're busy just to fall into the same repetitious pattern.
Yeah.
And I think you need to be a little bit more Madonna, but not too much Madonna. We do. I'm showing my age now talking about Madonna is this incredible pop icon who has managed to reinvent herself like thousands of times. Some would argue maybe the current reinvention is maybe a little what's the word I'm looking for? Surprising, maybe. I don't know. But I have a tremendous amount of respect, not necessarily for her character, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for the lady in terms of her ability to reinvent and to reimagine who she should be to fit that time frame for her life and what she's trying to do. And I think, it's so easy just to fall into the default routine and forget about it. And it just gets boring. It's like going to the gym and doing the same exercise all the time. I'm just bored already. So I have to change my gym routine every 6 weeks. Otherwise I'm out. Right.
I think there's a balance because we talked about how, it can take up to 12 to 18 months for it to start actually bringing back some kind of fruit, whatever that looks like. So there's an element of staying the course and just going through those motions because you have to. But there's also an element of making sure you're continuing to be relevant. And as you say, like making sure you're putting content out there in a way that people want to consume it or do consume it.
Yeah, and I think I would add to this that actually the danger is you change too much. And so then it becomes unrecognizable because you've changed too much and you're changing too often. People like the comfort of consistency, don't they? They like the comfort of knowing how something's going to look and feel. And I think people are happy for change in some ways, but how you implement that change, you've really got to think about your audience in podcasting. If it was different every week, or I was changing this or I was changing that, people would really struggle. But even though we're changing EP at the moment, the base of it will still be very familiar to our audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because I think otherwise I should do a different podcast.
Yeah.
And gather a different audience.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. Matt, with all that you have learned along the way in 6 years, if you were launching your podcast today, how would you do it differently?
Oh, that's a really good question. How would I do it differently? Well, I mean, I would have done it as an interview podcast straight away, rather than the way we launched EP, which was just me rambling on for the first 21 episodes, which even I got bored of, to be fair. I think I would focus more on who my guest is rather than who I'm trying to reach as the audience.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't do it as an audience building strategy first. I mean, I'm very aware that you do build an audience and you have to think about that. But I would the first thing I'd do is I'd focus on the guest. So I'd make a list of 100 people who I thought was going to have the biggest influence on my business by interviewing them. And that would be a range of people. So people from the industry, people like Brett, I'd have Brett on the show. Because not only does Brett know stuff which makes me look good, he also has an audience. So he'll share out the podcast and stuff and you get to reach his audience. I would have a lot more of my, and this is one of the changes we're making in EP actually, I would have a lot more of my ideal client profile on the show. So historically, EP has been me interviewing experts, which is great if you're trying to build a tribe, if you're trying to build an audience, because people want to hear from experts. But I think with the route that we're going down, I need to invite onto the show more of the founders, just to hear their story, hear what they're going through. That's going to help me with my sales pitch, with understanding, the challenges people are facing, with networking and so on and so forth. So I'm not ditching the experts at all. I'm keeping them, but I'm also bringing in more of the founder conversations. So I would definitely do those things. And I think I would start there. Something that we're going to experiment with. I don't know if I was starting out whether I'd experiment with this. I wonder if it's slightly more, you need to get your feet under the table a little bit first. I feel like I've got my feet under the table, I suppose. Quite a privileged position in a lot of ways. Ironically, when we launched EP, there was a lot of me talking. And we found the interview thing worked better. It was much easier. I didn't have to work as hard to prepare content. There's 1,000 reasons why interviews work super well. All of that said, thanks to Peter Murphy-Lewis, who has been on the show, I feel.
A couple times.
He has been on a couple of times. And if you need a marketing consultant guy, he's a really interesting chap to talk to. He thinks very differently. One of the things that he suggested, which has sort of kickstarted a whole train of thought, is to now a bit more intentionally position me as an expert. So whilst I piggyback people like Brett Curry, and I piggyback their reputation, which builds that expertise, I'm going to start now on the show a third pillar of content, I suppose. We're going to create these mini series, I suppose, is a way to sort of frame it. And there'll be 5 to 10 episodes around a topic where it's probably just me, with a talking head shot, but also thinking a bit more about YouTube. We're trying to grow YouTube a lot more. Because a lot of our audience is audio. 99.9% is audio, whatever it is YouTube. And I really want to focus on YouTube now, and I really want to grow that. And so creating these sort of talking head shots where you see my computer and I'm talking about certain things, mixing those with blog posts and downloads, the freebie stuff, bringing that together a bit more, I think is going to be a little bit more helpful. I don't know if it'll work, something that we're going to experiment with. And I think I'm in a place now actually where the audience do want to hear from me a little bit more. Yeah. And so, bringing these sort of little mini series that people can opt in or out of, I think will be really an interesting experiment.
I think that's cool.
Well,
That's cool.
time will tell.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, listening to you, it sounds like your focus would be a lot more on networking with the right people as opposed to building thousands of listeners.
Yeah, I've never been bothered about downloads. If you ask me how many people download EP, I couldn't tell you. I've never remembered the number.
Yeah.
The more interesting numbers to me are people that have contacted me as a result, right? They're always more interesting. And I don't need many of them to make the whole business work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, if I get 2 or 3 acquisitions a year, well, that's a big deal for us as a company. It doesn't, it's not mega high numbers. Do you know what I mean? And so, yeah, I would definitely say I focus. One of the changes that we're making is, like I say, to focus much more on our ideal client profile and feature them more on the podcast. So to network more with founders as well as experts, as we call them internally, would be a fairly correct statement. If I was just bothered about audience, then I would probably just go and throw some money behind ads and just just grow the YouTube channel. But I feel like I need to establish a bit more the founders on the show and establish. I need to do at least 2 or 3 of these sort of mini series before I've really fully understood it.
Yeah.
Once I've done that and I feel like the content is there, then I think we will then start to grow the audience as well. But the primary focus at the moment is the guests. And again, guests are cheaper, aren't they? Right. So it's easy in some respects to find the guests. You just go to LinkedIn, or there's going to be people that you know, or people that you might not know, but you know somebody who knows them. Right. So within a day, you could easily make a list of 100 ideal people that are going to, and it's not cost you anything. Right. So let's just go and outreach to them, get their email, give them a ring, LinkedIn, whatever. That's free. It costs time. Whereas I think to grow your audience costs money. And I know that there are podcasts out there that will say, well, yeah, we didn't spend money and we've got a really big audience. And you're like, yeah, but you're the 1 in 1,000. Yeah. Right. The other 999, they're going to have to spend some money. Right. And you can do the organic social. You can do the reels, the short form video content and all the things that we know to do. And they're all good things. But I think the reality is you're going to have to put money behind it. And I think at the moment, I think the current budget is like $5 per subscriber. So if you want 10,000 subscribers, you're going to have to put 50 grand behind it, which may or may not make sense for your business, right? Whereas if you focus on guests, you're just going to have to put a day behind that, right?
Yeah.
And so we will start to build audience and we will start to put money behind it. And experiment with that. But that's then super top of funnel in your marketing. And I think before I go super top of funnel, like with that whole high brand awareness thing, I've got to make sure that the funnel's working super well for the 100 that I'm reaching. Do you know what I mean? Then I can expand it out and go and get the 1,000 or the 10,000 or whatever.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's really exciting, all the new directions that you're considering and exploring. Sounds good.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it, right? And seeing where it goes, and seeing the changes. I think it's going to be fun. And it just stops you getting bored. Not that my guests are boring on any stretch of the imagination, but there's only so many conversations I can have about AI or... It's like... with e-commerce, even with e-commerce, I know technology is always moving, but a lot of the topics end up being the same. And so I feel like I don't need to have another conversation about influencer marketing for the next 6 months. So I've had 2 or 3. They've all approached it from different angles. And in 6 months' time, the bizarre thing is in 6 months' time, we'll get 10 influencer marketing companies go, can we come on your show? And you don't hear anything. Do you know what I mean? So these things come in sort of fits and starts. I think one triggers the other. It's like, oh, they run their show. They're one of my competitors. Maybe I can get on the show. Which I always find quite amusing. But it does stop you getting bored, and I'm really psyched by the changes. I think it'll be impactful, but I won't know for another 18 months.
That's right. Another 18 months. Matt, this has been such fun having you back.
It's always nice to be back. It's a shame we're not in the studio, but it's a bank
I know.
holiday and I'm not coming in.
No,
So,
me either.
yeah, it's filmed from the studio at home.
Yes.
Which is what you can't see, actually, unless you're watching the video. Can you see this here behind me?
Yeah, what is
Nothing
that?
to do with podcasting. I just want you to know I'm really chuffed with this.
What is it?
This is my homemade air conditioning unit.
Oh, nice.
So I've got my Yeti cooler
Okay.
down there, and
Is that the green thing?
That's the green thing, yeah. And in your cooler, you just put loads of water, ice, and ice, and cool it down to like 2 degrees. You then pump the water with a little pump. Cost me $5 off Amazon. You pump that around that car radiator, which costs like a few quid. And behind that is an old fan, which I've screwed to the timber frame structure there, which made out of scrap wood.
Okay.
And so the fan blows air through the radiator, which is frozen by it's frozen. It's like 2 degrees, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so you get like a DIY air conditioning unit. The whole thing cost me like $15.
I love it.
And I'm like, this is genius.
And it's working because you're sitting there in a hoodie.
Well, yeah. And you're just like, well, this is great. So I'm sharing that.
It's great. And it's quiet.
Unlike me.
Guess you can't have competition.
That's so true. No, I have a very nice sound desk. I have my Rodecaster.
You do.
And it has a noise filter on the Rodecaster. They call them noise gates. It's one of the things with podcasting is you start to learn all this bizarre terminology. Your noise gate, yes, my noise gate is set to 50 dB or whatever it is. I don't even know. But it just filters out all those background noises, which is it's brilliant.
It's cool.
Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. Matt, before we wrap up, where can people find you if they want to learn more from you?
Well, am I still on the Podjunction website? Have you just like totally removed me?
I think I might have totally removed you.
There's like no trace. Well, don't go there then. Just go to eCommercePodcast.net if you want to know more about. And there's all kinds of links from eCommercePodcast.net, but that's where I send people. Is just go to eCommercePodcast.net. I wish I could buy the .com, eCommercePodcast.com. That would be amazing, but I've not managed to do it yet. Yeah. So don't go to .com. Go to eCommercePodcast.net.
Yeah. And you're also quite active on LinkedIn, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm getting better at LinkedIn. Definitely getting better at it. So yeah, if you want, come find me on LinkedIn. Just go to LinkedIn / is it in linkedin.com/in/Matt Edmondson? I think that's what it is. Or just search for Matt Edmondson and you'll find me on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really active on LinkedIn. I'm trying to post every day. I do at least 3 or 4 times a week. And that in itself is another podcast. Like how to make it on LinkedIn. I think it's a really fascinating experiment in social media for business people. And it's changed so much even in the last 6 months.
Yeah. It's always changing, isn't it?
It is. I don't know what Microsoft's playing at. They just keep changing the whole thing. It's like you think you've got it figured out. And they're like, nope, we're going to screw it up again. Okay. And so I guess it keeps people like me on their toes trying to think what's working, what's not working. But LinkedIn's really interesting if you're podcasting, especially if you're podcasting B2B.
Yeah.
So if your ideal client profile is business people, like with eCommerce podcast, my ideal client profile are e-commerce founders. My experience is a lot of those people are not on LinkedIn. Some of them are, but most of them aren't. So I can use LinkedIn as a strategy to go and connect with them to try and get them on the show. Where LinkedIn works really well is if I want the experts.
Yeah.
Because they are definitely on LinkedIn. You've got, I'm part of a little community. You've got people like Jimmy Kim, who's always emailed, John Roman, who is the subscription BattleBox guy, he's just great. So you've got all these sort of people that you can definitely connect with on LinkedIn and build a relationship with, which is kind of fun. And just as a freebie, do you like freebies? Should I give a freebie?
Yeah, do it.
LinkedIn at the moment feels like it's not about what you post, it's about what you comment. And so I've historically spent a fair bit of time thinking about, well, what do I post? Do you know what I mean? And trying to, because I refuse just to let AI write a post and it just gets posted automatically. That just drives me up the wall. That's not credible. Doesn't mean to say I won't use AI to help me write the post, but a lot of thought goes into writing those posts. I don't know how long it takes you to do it, but it's at least 20 minutes. I would have thought, beginning to end, by the time you've thought about it, written it, edited it, found a picture, posted it, blah, blah, blah. Commenting. So what we do is we post and we comment just like, love that. Hey, just give it a thumbs up and all that sort of stuff. And there's no real thought behind that. But at the moment, I'm finding that if I spend a little bit of thought on the comments and comment on people, so I might, for example, go to, say, Jimmy Kim, right? I'm going to use Jimmy as an example. So Jimmy's big into email marketing, right? He's an email marketing guy. He posts a lot about email marketing. So I know a lot of the people that follow his content are people in e-commerce. They become my ideal client profile, right? Not all of them, but a chunk of them. And so what I can do is if I comment well on Jimmy's post, then all of his people that he's connected to on LinkedIn will see what I've done. And then they come and they sort of connect with you and say, God, this guy's interesting. He's written something interesting. And so it's a bit of a shortcut to getting connected to your ideal client profile. And every now and again, I'm obviously not going to go onto Jimmy's feed and go, well, Jimmy, if you listen to the e-commerce podcast, because, he punched me in the face, and quite rightly so, or delete the comment maybe would be a bit more appropriate. But there's no reason why I couldn't go on there and say, Jimmy, this is great. You make a great point. Fred Flintstone, who came on, I was talking to him, and I can tag Fred Flintstone, because he's been on the show. He was talking about this on the show, and it's just like, this is brilliant because of X, Y, and Z. And you're adding value. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was my freebie.
No, I like it. That's good. Matt Halloran talked about not posting and ghosting.
I love that phrase.
Yeah,
Don't post and ghost.
Yeah, and I've been trying to be better at not posting and ghosting, but I think it feeds into what you're saying. You're post something and just stick around until someone responds and respond to it right away, or share it out with somebody else. Don't just leave it and go on your merry way. No,
it works super well. I would say super well. It's working better than the other things at the moment. LinkedIn obviously want you on their platform, which is why I wouldn't use automated scheduling tools. With LinkedIn, I'd post it from your computer. And then, like you say, stick around. It doesn't mean you just stand there staring at the screen.
No.
But everybody's got dual monitors these days. So you just put it on one of your monitors and you just monitor it.
Yeah.
And if you've not got dual monitors, what's wrong with you? Go and get another monitor. Jeez. Apparently dual monitors, I discovered this the other day, increases productivity by around 37%.
Oh, absolutely it does. Yeah, totally.
Which is mental when you think about the quantum leap. So yeah, I'm like, let's just dual monitor up, baby. I just need... I've got 3. I used to have 4, and I've run out of space, so I needed to take one of them down. But I think it's, why would you not, right?
Yeah.
You just put LinkedIn on one of them.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Totally. You sound like that turtle out of what was it? Finding Nemo. Do you know the one?
Yes, I do.
The one where he gets caught in the ribs. Totally. Give me some noggin, dude.
Anyway, moving on. No, but if you're listening, you'll find all those links in the show description. And if you've been curious about using podcasting as a strategic tool for your own business growth, I hope this episode has given you plenty of inspiration. As always, thanks for listening. Bye from Matt and from me, and I'll see you next time.